about drivers of broad-scale adult Atlantic sturgeon behavior on the Hudson River. And I just want to preface this by saying that sturgeon size does not matter. We still love our little lake sturgeon.
All right, thanks everybody for coming here. I think my co-authors as well, Amanda Higgs and Blake Doc, helped me out with this work, and I have a whole list of people at the end. I'll thank you if I have time. But so we've heard a lot about lake sturgeon this morning. I moved to the bigger, but not more important sturgeon in New York. The main difference between lake sturgeon and Atlantic sturgeon is that Atlantic sturgeon are anadromous, so they'll spend most of their life in the marine environment, returning back to the rivers to spawn, where their eggs will develop, and then the juveniles will start their migration as well. Because of that big migration, the historic fishermen really took advantage of this, and they would go out in these little rowboats and set these long gill nets for these sturgeon almost the size of their rowboats. So they would go out there, take advantage of this huge migration, and they also doubled down on it that they would migrate themselves. So they would follow the migration in these little shanty towns, floating shanty towns. They follow the migration and capture sturgeon mainly for caviar, but also for a flesh fishery. But they were really good at catching these fish in these rowboats with these gill nets, and they crashed the population like many other sturgeon populations, many other fish populations. Around 1900, the fishery ramped up quickly and then just immediately just crashed, going all the way down to just a few percent of the peak fishery. And those landings for the whole East Coast really were maintained at that really super low level all the way up until the late 90s, and then eventually they became listed in 2012. So when I started my master's in 2009, our original goal was to identify spawning habitat in the Delaware River. I'm currently at the University of Delaware, got my master's at Delaware State, but so you're wondering why I'm up here in New York studying fish on the Hudson River. Well, we originally wanted to tag fish offshore, follow them into the Delaware River, and identify the spawning grounds in the Delaware, which was the largest sturgeon river in North America. So there's two little arrows here where we tagged Atlantic sturgeon off the coast of Delaware. Yeah, and I'll start this animation so you can see kind of at the start of our project, these two fish moving around. We're going to follow them right up the Delaware River, right? This is like ideal situation. But of course they don't go up the Delaware. They go outside the coast of New Jersey, and then they go up to the Hudson, spend a couple weeks up there, spawn, and then return. So this is not super shocking when you look at the literature, look at all the population estimates, because the Hudson currently has the largest population for Atlantic sturgeon. And even though it's the largest, it's still maybe less than 1,000, right around 1,000 spawners. But it's a great system to learn about Atlantic sturgeon range-wise, so we can identify what the drivers of movements and behaviors are, since we have these larger numbers than we do in some of the other rivers. So what did we do? We took our research plan, and like the shanty towns, we moved it up to the coast of the river. We were able to gain a little more data. So we didn't do this alone. We had the help of a bunch of collaborators, mainly with SUNY Stony Brook and the New York PEC. We put out and maintained this whole big long line of a receiver array here. I think it's 63 receivers. You can count the dots, prove me wrong if you want to. But we did this tagging well over 100 adults, and doing this for I think about 7 years is the amount of data I'm going to show you today. So to look at their behaviors and their movement patterns, they use the package B-Track into R, which is able to separate movements versus residencies, and I find movements as sequence of detections across multiple receiver stations. Longer than 10 minutes is shorter than a week to get rid of some artifacts, and then residence was continuous detection on a single station that lasted longer than 6 hours. So just quickly to show what that looks like, if we generalize it for the whole time period of the study, we have mean duration over here on the left, indicated by the size of the circle, and mean duration on a single receiver station average about 18 hours. You see kind of pretty uniform up and down the whole river, with sturgeon not spending a lot of time in this area just below West Point. When we switch over to residency events, these are the events longer than 6 hours. We see that Atlantic sturgeon like to sit on these receivers located right around West Point, and then some up in Kingston. And we know this area around West Point is a historic staging ground, and then spawning grounds occur from there, maybe a little bit further north, all the way up to Kingston, so the known historic spawning grounds for sturgeon in the river. So we're going to take these movements and residencies and link them to environmental data. So we use the Syracuse stations up and down the river, as well as sediment data from the New York DEC, and also use lunar phase, day of year, a couple other variables to look at that as well. And additionally, I used sex of the individual to see if that was important as well. Are the different sexes behaving differently in the river? So I linked those movements and residencies to the environmental variables. You see here on the right here, these are density plots with the parameter on the x-axis, density on the y. The black lines are movement behaviors that are linked to those environmental variables, and the blue line is the resident behaviors. So taking a first glance, you really don't see a lot of patterns that jump out. A little bit with river kilometer, you see this one spike here where they're moving more at right around 23 degrees C, but it's really not super clear if these fish are behaving different based on these environmental conditions. So we wanted to clear things up a little bit, so I used the generalized additive mixed model. And what the mixed model does for us is it accounts for different effects from individuals. So our mixed parameter was that individual effect. And this model here, we started out to start building the model, I put all of the environmental variables in the model, and then we down selected as they were not significant. We pulled those variables out, rerun the model until we got all the way down to all the variables in the model were significant, and we only got the significant ones. So for duration of residency, we only had 2 variables that were significant, and day of the year was the most significant variable. And interesting enough, I highlight here, this is right around the spawning time for Atlantic sturgeon, and we actually found that the duration of residency were the shortest during the spawning time. So these fish aren't really sitting still during the spawning time like some people may think. They go to the spawning area and just hang out. They're actually moving throughout the whole time during the spawning season. So moving on, so now moving away from duration of residency to movement versus resident pattern. Again, we put all the variables back in, and we took out the ones that were not significant, and we only had 2 that were not significant for the model this time, sediment and sex of the individual. And we look at the variable importance of those parameters. We see that really the 2 highest ones that contain the most data in the model were turbidity and distance from the salt front. And we can debate about what these things are, but what I found super interesting is that a lot of the variables that we found were also variables that matched some findings that I had in the coastal ocean for Atlantic sturgeon habitat. So we look at temperature, day of year, and turbidity. In the ocean, I used ocean color, not turbidity, but they were able to really predict really well Atlantic sturgeon occurrence in the coastal ocean. So they're Atlantic sturgeon that we think are having these same cues, whether in the river or in the coastal ocean. We see this repeated pattern of cues. So to kind of sum that up, sum those results up quickly, we see this longer duration residencies before and after the spawning period, but short duration during the spawning times. We see more residence events during super high turbidity levels and super low turbidity levels, and this has been linked to other spawning sturgeon, and again in that coastal ocean environment as well. And then when we look at river kilometer, we're seeing this staging area where we saw the bigger circles down below West Point. We see that's indicative. We know that they're going there. They're staying put for quite a while, so that's probably an important area just below the spawning habitat. And then we see more higher movements near the salt front. Now the salt front's moving, so that could be pushing sturgeon around as well as the tide and precipitation changes, so it may not be good for them to stay in one place when the conditions are changing all the time. And then we see in the upper and lower river reaches, we see the sturgeon moving quite a bit. So the lower river, that's pretty obvious as they're migrating in and out. There's no good habitat for them there, so they're just going to blast one through. And the upper river, that could be a result of a search behavior. They're searching for respawning habitat, searching for other individuals, something like that. And then again, we see that spike right around 23C. And 23C, that's the maximum spawning temperature for Atlantic sturgeon. So when the river gets too warm for spawning, they're probably leaving and getting out of the river. So we're going to see a high movement during that period. So in terms of habitat protection, what do we do to protect these sturgeon more? Try to increase the recovery. Of course, we can protect those spawning and staging areas. That's already known. That's pretty obvious. But we also want to protect the conditions of the river, not just the actual physical places on the river. So we want to make sure that the turbidity levels stay within reasonable ranges. We don't want to see the flash events where the sediment loads are coming down the river. So stormwater management, things like that could really help with that. And then one thing that's been proposed recently, especially after Hurricane Sandy, is putting floodgates or tidal gates at the mouth of the Hudson River and at the entrance to the harbor to prevent flooding to the city. Now, if you do that, you're really going to screw up the river. You're going to really screw up the flow regime, and you're going to screw up the influence of the salt water coming up the river. You narrow that channel, you're going to really reduce the amount of salt water that comes in the river, and that's going to change a whole bunch of things that sturgeon are queuing on, but also lots of other species. So even when the gates are open, you're still going to really have a big impact if something like that happens in the upper river. So, but we've been kicking around ideas because we know we're not capturing all of the cues and the drivers of the movement behaviors. So what could it be beyond what we're looking at? And one thing that is coming out more and more in the literature is that fish are social creatures, and that's not just highly intelligent fish or whatever, if there are any, but we're seeing this in reef fish spawning aggregations. If you take a reef fish aggregation and you wipe it out, it's not going to come back to that same place, those same conditions. It might show up somewhere else, or it may just get extirpated completely. So we know that that is a learned behavior. Recently, in some salmon work on the West Coast, as I have these figures down here, they use social models to help predict salmon movement. And so the yellow line is going to be a model without social cues in it. The red line is with social cues, and the blue line is the empirical data. So you can see when those researchers included social cues into their models, they did a much greater job of estimating behavior and movement conditions. So we think if we can do something like this for sturgeon, maybe that would be helpful as well. So we want to think of protecting not only the areas, not only the habitat, physical habitat, geographic habitat, but the conditions of the river. But we also need to protect the fish. We got to make sure that we're not impacting and disrupting these links to spawning migrations. So if you have tidal gates at the mouth of the river, you close the river, and you stop the start of the migration, you could end up stopping the entire migration, even though you're only closed for a little portion of it if you're disrupting those social cues. Or you could be disrupting cues if you knock out one spawning season. Maybe later down the line, those cues are not passed down to generation, and that learned behavior does not continue on through the population. And that could be what happened in the differences between the Delaware and the Hudson River. The Delaware once had a huge spawning population compared to all the other rivers, but now it's one of the lowest. So maybe those cues got messed up and they don't know where to spawn, or they lost some of that learned behavior over time. So the last question that probably some of you have for me is do we have the data to indicate social behavior? Can we tease out if these sturgeon are being social? And the answer is we actually might have that data in our current hard drives. We have a lot of data, many years of data with lots of large individuals tracked over many years, each individual. So maybe we do actually have that. We can see are the relationships between the individuals. So with that, I have a bunch of people to thank, everybody that helped either on the river, putting out receivers, mainly the database wranglers, right? So I had 3 or 4 agencies to get data from and collect. I didn't do that. Actually, Lori Brown did all that. So get it all together, make it available to do these larger, big scale analysis. And then all the state agencies, universities involved, Hudson River Foundation, and the fishermen actually went out there and helped us against these large adults. That